I want to welcome everybody. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Bobby Haber from Mondo, and here with my partner, Joanne Abbott-Green. Joanne, come into the camera for a second.
Hi.
We're here in New York City, Manhattan to be specific, and I want to welcome all of you to our very, very first Zoom conversation. It's called What Now and What's Next? I'd like to have those answers. I do not, but clearly in the midst of everything going on, that we really wanted to just bring as many of our community members together. And we're so happy that the turnout was just incredible. So here we go. It is our first time doing this. It's my first time doing this. So we're all together for the ride. We've really got some amazing panelists who are going to be joining us today. In no particular order on your screen, we have Mehmet Ded, who is the Director of Programming for Mondo.NYC here in Alphabet City in New York City. We have Becca Fox. Becca is frontwoman for the band The Gentlemen Brawlers from Brooklyn. We have Sherry Hugh. She's a writer, researcher, and publisher of the wonderful Water and Music newsletter and podcast. Hi, Sherry. And we have Michael Poster, who's a partner for Michelman and Robinson. And just some real quick tech housekeeping. Due to the large number and our first time going through this, we've got audio muted. We've got the video disabled to all but moderator and panelists. This is going to be recorded by Zoom, and we hope, barring any kind of freezing or lag time, that we will be able to make the recording available post-conversation. But we will be accepting Q&A via chat. So any questions, any thoughts, please do send them along, and we'll do our best. There's been lots of questions which have been submitted already, which we really appreciate. I can say with fair certainty, there's no way we will get to all of them. I know some of our panelists have a hard stop at 5, but if we're all up to it and some of us can continue, we can go beyond that. The format will be very simple. First, I'm just going to ask our panelists a general question. Then we're going to go to some pre-submitted questions. That will run roughly about half an hour or so. And then we'll segue into the Q&As. And again, we'll kind of play that by ear. So if everybody's ready, we'll get going. We're going to start with a general question. And it's for all of you who want to contribute, one that has no easy answer. So first of all, it's how are you doing? And amidst the gravity of the obvious global health crisis, tell us, share your thoughts as to the best way that you think to cope. How are you coping? And let's just go around the table here. Michael, I'm going to throw it to you first.
I'm doing fine, mercifully. Trying to stay healthy and stay sane within the 4 walls or so of where we live. The only thing I could do is try to stay positive, stay busy, stay positive, stay healthy. Keep in touch with people who I care about and who matter to me rather. And that's basically what I'm trying to do. Think about not necessarily where things are right now, but where are things going to be 6 months from now? What is the world going to look like 6 months in the future, or 3 months or 12 months, whatever it's going to be? Because trying to focus on where we are right now, we're in a very tumultuous time. Look to see where the opportunities are going forward and what the situation is going to be as it evolves.
Great. Thank you, Michael. Mehmet?
Hi, everyone. I would echo Michael's sentiment that we're trying to stay positive here and just really trying to get mentally ready when we will be reopening, hopefully, soon. It's very difficult as a venue to stay closed when your mandate was to actually bring arts and music to the community. And unfortunately, we can't do that right now. So the best is to really try to see how we can ride out the storm. We are collectively as a venue looking at different options, which we can get to later, financially speaking and otherwise. But I think the most important thing is that people stay healthy, that we are all trying to stay positive in this difficult time, and that there will be a way out, and just keeping a positive attitude and just hoping that day will come very soon.
Thank you, Mehmet. Sherry?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, fortunately, I'm also still staying healthy, still staying safe and sane in the current moment. I guess as a freelance journalist, I work from home. I had been working from home quite a bit, and so in terms of day-to-day work, that aspect of my work hasn't really changed that much. Obviously, there's like the huge psychological element of just days feeling like weeks and weeks feeling like months. It's definitely been like that, you know, for all of March and some of February as well. I was thinking of like the best ways to cope, and I realized that there are things that we should all be doing anyway, but are especially important in the current climate. One, obviously, is taking care of health. Definitely taking sleep a lot more seriously, where maybe I like wouldn't previously had taken it seriously, which might be like endemic to just like music and entertainment industry in general. And then I personally like also feel more positive, just um, not that I'm like not like this at other points of the year, but like above all else, just being in a mindset of like serving and helping other people right now, just like helping whoever needs it. There's so many people across the world in all industries, but especially music as well, who need all the help they can get. And so just prioritizing that first and foremost in my work has been helpful in terms of like reaching more people, but also, yeah, ultimately helping them too.
Thank you, Sherry. Becca, you are, we are all in some form of the music business. You are our lone artist on the panel today. So I think you've got a unique perspective, and we're anxious to hear it.
Yes. Well, definitely we've been doing a lot of focus on singing and writing in the studio and just working on the material that we otherwise haven't been able to get out. So it's been kind of like a little bit of a minor blessing for us just to be able to work on our craft and just finding new creative ways of coping. I've been spending a lot of time either on the roof or in the basement drilling things, you know, and not annoying my neighbors. Just trying to keep the flow of information going between me and other musicians and just people in general, and having more conversations with people that I wouldn't normally have gotten otherwise, just because we've been doing this busy rat race in New York City for so long. So that's been happening, and just taking like the daily challenges as they come. Like this morning our toilet went out and we were like dealing with trying to figure out do we get a plumber? I don't know. Do we fix it ourselves? So just little problem solving things like that. So.
Okay, thank you, everybody. We're going to head into the pre-submitted questions. And needless to say, a majority, in fact, the vast majority of them have to do with the live music industry. So you touched on it momentarily before, Mehmet, but will the live music business ever be the same? What guidelines can we implement now so that we're ahead of the curve and ready, if we're ever going to be ready for the new normal? Can you talk about that a little bit? And by the way, with regard to format, after the questions are asked, please, panelists, do feel free to jump in and comment on your co-panelists' discussion.
Yeah, that's a big one, actually. So I'm the music director for a music venue on the Lower East Side called Drum, and we used to present over 500 shows a year with music really from all across different genres and spectrums. A lot of national acts, a lot of local acts, but we also known as a sort of like world music club and venue for a lot of international talent from other countries. So our roots go really deep as far as like presenting a diverse style of music. And, you know, depending on what type of acts you're working with, obviously you will be affected in different ways. So if you're presenting a lot of international acts, that's going to be a little difficult to reschedule for the time being, only because it's going to take a while for these artists to make space in their travel, in their itinerary, to be able to come to the US for those tours. Same thing for national touring acts. You know, these tours are usually set up 6 months to a year ahead of time. So those shows that are being rescheduled now, we're looking at really end of this year, maybe next year, for rescheduling. If you're a venue with a lot of local acts, then, you know, those might be a little easier to schedule. But the problem obviously now is that we just don't know when we will be reopening. And I wish I had a crystal ball to tell everyone here, but for the time being, we're just taking it, you know, a month at a time. We canceled all of our shows in March when this thing first started. Then we started canceling April shows. You know, some of our May shows have been affected. So, you know, when you're at the club level, you're looking at 6 weeks to about 2 or 3 months ahead as far as like, the calendar being full. I'm hoping that we can open, sometime in early summer, end of May, maybe early June, and then see if we can build the momentum again. I think that's one of the biggest challenges. I mean, there's not as much you can do, truthfully speaking, as far as like, booking, because you just don't know when you're reopening. But I think mentally speaking, not to panic and, know that we will come back to this, and to sort of like maybe curb your expectations as to how fast you're going to go up on that trajectory. A lot of venues that are 5 or 10 years and older, there's a momentum that was built, and now we lost that momentum, all of us. So we have to rebuild that momentum after we open. And I think there's also something to be said about the attitude towards live music, which live music obviously is a very social, has a social element to it. So will people come out? Will they come out in droves? Will they support the community the way they used to support, or will it take some time? What kind of shows will actually do better? Are we talking about shows that people prefer to be seated at with maybe some distance between different other people, patrons? Or are we okay with doing standing room shows that are packed? Will those shows be affected? These are all things that we need to kind of like, keep in mind as we go through this. I think, drawing from the community is really the biggest support that we can think of right now, that I can think of, truthfully speaking. Knowing that our community is there to support us is probably, the biggest reason why we would want to come back to it, because we're not in this alone. We have a community, a robust community that we built over the past 12 years at our venue, and we see that online now with the responses we're getting from people on social media and otherwise. And knowing that, there will be a day when we will get back to presenting music and arts from different parts of the country and the world to our community is sort of like the reason why we are still in this, and we will keep pushing as much as we can.
I'd love to add to that if possible.
Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, as a band, it was really interesting. We definitely had gigs cancel for March and April, and we kind of had to postpone booking our spring tour indefinitely because we're just not sure when things will be safe again. When's a safe window? It seems a little inappropriate now to approach venues when no one's sure what's going on. We also had talked to one venue who was really frank with us. They were like, we're not even sure if we're going to be around in the fall. So, I mean, that's a reality. A lot of, we're having concerns as musicians, but it's also, our, like you were saying, just like how our show is going to be structured now. Is it going to be, our intimate show is going to be the thing where people are able to keep a distance? I just not sure. We have some, festivals planned for later in the summer, and we're just kind of crossing our fingers, but I'm also not holding my breath either, just as this situation changes so much.
I know, Mehmet, you have a GoFundMe site, and other venues do. So obviously, for those who can, in fact, afford any type of support, I'm sure that's a way that you could show your your appreciation and obviously your encouragement for these venues to keep on going. So, Michael, you had a thought?
Yeah, my thought was, I think there's going to be a ripple effect in a couple of different ways that are going to affect the industry, especially in live, because all of these things that were supposed to happen in the first quarter, second quarter, are going to get pushed to the third quarter and the fourth quarter, which means the third quarter and the fourth quarter are going to be jam-packed with festivals, events, tours, shows, conferences. All the stuff is getting pushed back. So you're going to get a kind of an attention dilution issue of and it's going to ripple through a lot of different media. For example, all these major motion pictures that are not being released to theaters, they're all getting pushed back. The same thing is going to happen in music. It's going to happen in TV because all the TV production is, most significant TV production is halted. So that's all going to get pushed back. So I think we're going to get kind of bombarded culturally with a lot of stuff in the third and fourth quarter. It's going to be very taxing on the attention span of the audience. It's going to limit how many places people can go to, how many things they can see. And I think it may honestly be until almost the first quarter of next year or the very end of the fourth quarter until we see things kind of normalize a little bit to deal with that backlog.
Can I just add a couple points to build on top of that come to mind?
Yes, of course. Go ahead, Sherry.
Okay, yeah. Michael, you just mentioned how a lot of films are being pushed back. At the same time, I noticed a lot more films being added to streaming or going to streaming much more quickly than they otherwise would have. Normally, there's some kind of theatrical window so that these production studios and theaters can maximize the revenue coming in. Now that is just totally out of the picture. And so, I think Disney and Universal are two are probably most that have embraced this. While the core product of a film versus a show or a concert, like they're so fundamentally different in many ways, I wonder if there might be an analog in the live industry in some way. I live stream is something that we'll be talking more about later in this conversation, but I'm thinking of, as an example, like live streaming or some kind of online experience being incorporated into tours as a core part of the fan experience and the audience experience, as opposed to just like a marketing tool or tool to just like spread the word to drive brick and mortar sales. One example is this artist named Emma McGann, who she's an independent artist and she makes vast majority of her money streaming on YouNow, which is this kind of like more open live streaming platform, similar to Twitch in some ways. And as a viewer, you can tip the artist who's streaming, and so the dynamics are similar. And she just had to postpone her U.S. tour, so she's based in the UK. She had to postpone her U.S. tour, but then at the same time, in parallel, she also launched a virtual tour pass, where people who could not access those shows in the U.S. could still tune in to select shows that were being live streamed on YouNow, and there was some interactive experience built into that show. And I think she told me a couple of weeks ago that the virtual tour is still happening. Like some of those shows are still happening, and the revenue coming in from that was able to offset kind of the postponed revenue from the brick and mortar tour. That's just a model that I hadn't really seen before. It's probably not for every artist, but I foresee more models coming up like that in the future, just as like the long-term impact of this extreme situation in terms of people combining offline and online experience or
Yeah, and I know that you have spent a lot of time just looking at the monetization areas. So maybe while we're on that topic, before we jump away, you've talked about some opportunities, for example, about independent artists getting advances. You've talked about, of course, live streaming, and I think, needless to say, beyond the obvious health issues, it really is sort of what that new model may be looking like. And to the extent that you can talk about, I know the data is so early and it's so new, but I'm curious as to sort of how you see some of that shaking out with regard to some of these opportunities, and to what extent are these available to, let's say, really new artists, more artists kind of on the very early part of their career, or are these primarily going to be able to be beneficial to the more seasoned indie artists who already have a following, and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that last question is really important, and I'll definitely touch on that. So first off, I could talk a little bit about the monetization options in live streaming. And so what's interesting to me is that there are a ton of platforms out there that have different business models from the artist or like streamer's perspective. You can host a stream for free on platforms like Facebook or Instagram Live. You can have what I call like a free to play kind of model on platforms like Twitch or YouNow, where you can stream for free, but fans can like donate to or tip the artist. It's almost like a busking kind of model, but online. And there are a lot of artists who make a lot of money that way, but it does require achieving a certain level of scale, I think, before you really can make, like, say, 50 to 100% of your income from that kind of tipping model alone. And then there are some platforms that implement the traditional ticketed or paywalled model of a brick and mortar show just online with a live stream. Some examples include Moment House, which is open to everyone. There's another one called Key. Then most of the ones like Key and Cadenza are actually closed off for now, but I'm sure they're going to be opening up their platform later this year as more artists go online. Yeah, my sense is that right now, because prior to this moment, live streaming was still considered kind of a niche fan engagement and revenue tactic in the music industry, there isn't really like a proven standard income model around that format yet. I think it'll be really important both for the artists performing. There's a lot more conversation now about like the legal side as far as like licensing and publishing is concerned. I think that will have to be figured out for there to be a true economy around that with music specifically. And then, yeah, you'd mentioned cash advances, which is something that had been coming up in the music distribution side of the music industry prior to this whole COVID-19 outbreak. But I'd written a little bit about this a couple weeks ago about a lot of independent distributors like TuneCore, CD Baby, STEM, Symphonic. They all now have these cash advance features where for select artists, if they qualify, they can get an advance on their future royalties. And so with some of the deals, the interest rate or the advance fee, I think for being like, I guess to be technically accurate, is pretty high. It can be as high as like 25, 30%, but it can also be as low as 5%, depending on how quickly you pay that advance off. So yeah, those are still emerging models, but I believe TuneCore has paid out $20 million in advances so far across all of its independent artists. And so across all of its own customers. Just to clarify, all these distributors are giving out advances to artists who have their catalog through their own platform. Yeah, so I think that would be really interesting to see evolve, especially in this current context. I believe Sound Royalties, which is an independent music financing firm, they now have no fee advances that they're giving to artists. But yeah, again, this is a situation where it's a financial services model and it's purely data driven. And so it really is only open to artists who are generating a certain number of streaming royalties specifically every month or every year. And so you could make the argument that the artists who need these kinds of advances the most, like the artists who are releasing their first album, who are like truly developing and emerging, won't be able to get it just because the data isn't there. So that is an element that is as yet unsolved and unaddressed by these features. But yeah, as you were saying, still very early stage.
So you mentioned legal, and Michael, I'm going to throw this to you. Your bailiwick really, and it relates to all the topics we've touched on already, and some we will inevitably talk about a little bit later. With regards to, and this is a very broad question, and I say in advance, Michael is not going to be giving legal advice, but giving just his thoughts on this. With regard to any type of obligations as a general matter, with regard to what has been obviously affected by coronavirus, from release dates to agent contracts to studio time you may have booked, to so on and so forth, just as a general rule with all those caveats. Can you speak a little bit about how an artist, especially obviously one early in their career without the resources to call, you were one of the members of your team, what as a general rule would you suggest?
Well, I think it depends. There's a lawyerly answer. It depends, right? There's a number of factors that go into the mix. So it's going to be a function of, is there a written contract? What's the actual words on the contract? What does it say? Whose obligations are you dealing with? Is it the artist's obligations or is it a counterparty's obligations? So for example, if you're an artist and you engage somebody to perform a service for you and they're not performing it, you're like, well, where are you? You're supposed to be here. You're supposed to send me this thing. You were supposed to release this thing, ship this thing, whatever it happens to be. All right, well, do they have any excuse or defense to get out of that? Similarly, if you're the artist and you took on an obligation, as you say, you booked studio time, or you engaged a service provider, a producer, a mixer, an engineer, and you say, well, look, I don't really need you to show up to the studio because I can't get into the studio. I can't get my backup team involved. I can't, do all these other things that I need to do. And the guy's like, well, that's terrific, but where's my check? Because you signed a contract that says, where's my money? So the answer is going to be, it depends. And it's going to depend on like I said, a lot of these things. Part of the driver is going to be, what is the nature of the obligation and why is it that it can't be performed? So if the obligation is, I was supposed to perform a show in the middle of New York City next Thursday. Well, Why can't I perform that? Well, the government happened to have said, you can't do that. You can't have the gathering, you can't have the event, and so on. Okay, well, that's one defense. If the excuse is, hey, so-and-so, you're supposed to do this, how come you haven't shipped me the something or delivered the something? And the answer is, well, I just don't have the money right now, or I'm under financial hardship. That's a lot thinner as an excuse, that you don't really have a lot of legal defenses in the sense of I'm hard up for cash. That's not much, that doesn't hold a lot of water most of the time. So those are a bunch of things that kind of go into the mix. So the answer is, unfortunately, there's not a specific silver bullet answer that's going to get you in or out of the situation, or necessarily going to be the answer to the problem. It's going to be specific to the circumstances.
Thanks, Michael. I know a lot of people have been joining us, so I'm going to ask everybody again just to say hello and let everybody know who you are and what your affiliation is. My name is Bobby Haber, and I'm from Mondo.NYC. Michael?
I'm Mike Poster. I'm a partner at Michelman & Robinson in New York. I'm a lawyer. I've been working in the music business for over 20 years, representing a broad range of publishers, labels, financing sources, some artists, and kind of a bunch of other people in between.
Mehmet?
Hi guys, my name is Mehmet Dede. I'm the Director of Programming at Club Drum in the Lower East Side in New York City. We are a 350 cap music venue, presenting over 500 shows a year, locally, nationally, and internationally touring acts.
Sherry?
Yeah, hi, my name is Sherry. I'm a freelance writer focusing on music and tech. I write a lot on a freelance basis for the likes of Billboard, Music Business Worldwide, NPR, and Pitchfork. And I also have my own newsletter and podcast under the umbrella Water and Music.
Thanks. And Becca?
Hi, I'm Becca. I'm the frontwoman of the Gentlemen Brawlers. We're based out of Brooklyn and Queens, New York, and we play a mix of Afrobeat and disco dance-inspired music. Nice to meet you.
Okay, thank you all. Becca, I'm going to stay with you. Obviously, you know, we've heard and we're aware of a lot of challenges, but you are where the rubber meets the road. Can you give us a sense as to the specific things fans can do at this point without us even beginning to understand what the new normal will be? How can they help you? How can they support you? What are the channels? And not just for Gentlemen Brawlers, but if you know sort of more generally based upon the artists that you speak with and connect with, how can they help?
My internet connection cut out and I missed half your question. Can you repeat it again?
I am so sorry. When I'm trying to unmute,
It's
but,
okay.
here in Manhattan, there are all you hear are ambulances.
Yeah,
so,
go for it. Do it one more time.
one more time. So tell us specific things that fans can do to support.
Oh, okay.
Not just financially, but otherwise, and not just for Gentlemen Brawlers, your band, but other bands that you've connected with.
You know, I would say over the past couple weeks, I've been connecting with a bunch of music communities, and that's kind of helped me get in touch with what other people have concerns with. And I wrote a blog post about this for the Sound Shop, just published last week, and I can't tell you how many responses and how much dialogue it's started, because we've all had the same questions and we don't know where things are going. Something personally that I think would be helpful in terms of just getting things that fans can do when we revisit booking later on. You know, something that I've noticed with our Instagram, if I'm looking into a new city, it's actually really helpful. I've just been saying to people, hey, do you guys know any venues in Pittsburgh that we can pitch to? What are awesome places we can look at? And that is way more helpful than us just, you know, diving in the black hole of the plethora of venues that may or may not be appropriate for our band. Another thing I would say is really Spotify playlists. If people can just explore, discover, listen, not just our band, but other bands, and share it with their friends, it really helps the analytics for a band, especially if you're a newer band and you don't have much of a presence on there. I think those are like two really helpful things that can, you know, get the word out.
Great, thank you. So here's a general question, shifting gears just a little bit. For all of you, what are some of the most helpful programs, apps, or business tools that you either have just come upon recently or in recent weeks that really optimize working remotely? Anything that has just sort of rocked your world lately in this new normal that we're in?
I guess I can give my actually very simplistic remote work stack. I guess so. I have a very specific kind of work in that I'm freelance writing. A lot of my work is just researching and writing online. I've done a lot of my interviews over the phone with like sources for stories, and so that hasn't changed. I mean, I also was doing more research into like remote work and music and asking people what they used, and I'm curious to hear like the thoughts of people on this panel as well. But the same tools that have been around for years have come up that are like still super powerful, like Slack. Zoom is obviously a very useful one. I guess I'm thinking about the importance of communication in the music industry behind the scenes, and the importance of having some kind of paper trail and some kind of source that you can look at to see like who made a certain decision about something. And so anything that can kind of help make that clear in a remote work setting, Slack is definitely helpful for that. Trello is one that's used quite a bit in like the tech world, Trello, and then like the product and project management world in general. So I'd recommend that as well. I recently learned about this site called Notion, which I believe is a paid product, but is almost like a much better, much sleeker version of Google Docs, and you can connect multiple documents and relate them to each other in a really clean way. And so, to be totally honest, I haven't like used it yet, but I've like looked a lot into it, have seen a lot of Notion pages that are really easy to navigate. So I'd recommend looking into that as well.
Can I contribute or?
Yes, please.
I was going to say Zoom has been really helpful. I've also used Google Meeting in order to talk with other musicians. The one thing that if somebody creates this, they'll be a billionaire, is how to collaborate musically without any latency issues. Because
that's a huge issue.
Yeah. I've done, even I'm also an avid tap dancer. I'm a dancer in general, and I've tried to take classes on Instagram Live and Facebook Live, and there's always like a delay, and you can't really play an instrument in real time with someone else. It can be you can do a lot of call and response and pre-recorded to send somebody the video, but there's no, like, for instance, like we're a 6-piece horn band. I don't see how we can actually play together in separate rooms. It's not really possible. So that's like a big issue I'm sure other bands are faced with, electronic music, solo acts, duos, people who live together. I think that's a lot easier. So just a thought.
Okay. Thank you. Michael, there was actually a question specifically for you. Have you seen a change as we're talking about sort of new technologies and new opportunities, have you seen a change in the types of opportunities your clients are considering in light of the current market situation?
I'm not seeing it yet, because I think there's a lot of retrenchment going on. I think a lot of people are taking a bit of a wait and see attitude to see how things are going to shake out. I think the situation at the moment is very new and very real time. And at the moment, I'm not necessarily seeing how this is translating into new opportunities, other than the fact that people who were interested in investing in music assets before are still interested, because to speak financial speak, it's a non-correlated asset. That is, it's an asset. Music makes money and it performs without any regard to how the public markets do, or how commodity prices move, or if the Dow goes bouncing around like a Spalding, it's not going to make a difference to the music business. So in that sense, you may actually see increased investment into the sector in the long term. At the moment, I'm not seeing it yet, because I think, like I said, people want to see a little bit how the chips fall.
So Mehmet, another crystal ball question, and I'll be amazed if you can answer it, but when do you think artists should actually start to look at booking shows again?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question right now. That's on everybody's mind, and not just on the buying end, but also on the booking agency ends as well. My approach to all of this is really take it, one day at a time. We are basically being bombarded with information these days. I have to say that truthfully, I spend most of my time not really programming shows, and not only because we don't know when we're opening, but also because we just have to make sure that we can salvage what we have right now. We need to stay in business. We need to reopen in, X months when it's time. And we need to go back to our relationship with the promoters that we had and with the managers and the booking agencies, and kind of like gain some of that momentum that we have completely lost at this point. And in order to salvage the moment, we are looking at different options. And I know that I'm not the only one, because I'm part of a ton of webinars that are happening on a weekly basis, and we all are concerned of the same thing, no matter what your size is. And one of it is, how do you payroll your employees? What do you do with your staff? What kind of loans can you get out there that can benefit you, just so you have some kind of cash flow? I think that's really the biggest issue right now. There's zero income. You're completely decimated. And how do we make things work? We can furlough a lot of workers, but there's no guarantee that when we're up and running, that A, they will be there, and B, that, things will look pretty different, when we come back to it all. So because we're taking it one day at a time, I'm looking at really like June now, but, ask me in a few weeks time, and I might say September. I also feel that a lot of things will be pushed to the fall. So it'll be quite busy, in the fall, and that's a good problem to have, truthfully speaking. I hope we can get to that. There's maybe, a possibility that we may not be even back in business, during the summer months. I mean, it really depends. We don't know how the crowds will react to going out again and going out so fast, and, being in the same space with other people. The same goes for the artist end, obviously. I mean, a lot of question marks, a lot of unknowns, and we're still just waiting for a lot of things to be revealed and to have a better understanding. I mean, each passing day, we get a better idea about what this virus can do and what best ways to protect it. I know more now than I knew 2 weeks ago, certainly. So things are changing really fast, and it's real difficult to predict. And instead of like making that prediction, I'm actually more concerned about making sure that I can now keep some of the staff and keep, the operations that we had intact. And how can we use the same kind of, elements and the same team that we have in place right now when we are ready to reopen.
Great. Thank you. A question that continues to come up, and really for any of you, but I know Michael's firm has been hard at work putting together daily sort of translations to what's coming out of Washington. This is regarding the gig economy, which obviously many of us are part of. And is there a sort of a down and dirty quick translation, again, Michael or anybody, with regard to our gig economy workers being covered in, I guess, Stimulus 3, because to what extent, obviously, as much as they are, that will help some of the many issues we've talked about today, not come close to making them whole. But are they, or are they not, or is that too simple a yes or no question?
The answer is yes, they are covered, but it depends. The answer is that under the CARES Act, which was just signed into law basically a few days ago, there's going to be payments of up to $1,200 for individuals. There's going to be expanded unemployment benefits, the unemployment benefits include gig workers, self-employed workers, and freelancers. This is the first time that's ever happened. That's a major change. There's small business loans that are going to be available to freelancers and self-employed people, some of which are basically a non-repayable loan, which is what we call a grant, in other words, but basically it's a loan that you don't have to repay. I don't know if the tax code's been adjusted to reflect that, so you don't have to pay taxes on it, but that I don't know yet. There's also a broad range of arts funding that's been funded through the NEA, through state and local organizations, as well as other various types of tax relief for self-employed persons and small businesses, whether it's tax credits, tax deferrals, and so on. I know Billboard's website has a good series of resources related to different types of state and federal resources for people in the current situation. They have a good listing of it. My firm's been doing, on our website at Michelman & Robinson, there's a digest that includes some detail about the various things that may be a little lawyerly for everybody. But the bottom line is that yes, freelancers, gig workers, and self-employed people are going to be covered under some of these new benefits.
Thanks. And I've asked you all crystal ball questions. So there was a question with regard to Mondo in October. And I wish I could answer it other than to say that as we currently stand, we are hoping that October is safe, but not too many months ago, June seemed safe. So yes, it is going on as scheduled, as planned. Obviously, we will be very diligent with regard to the situation. And we have no doubt that it may be a very different place to go in a different situation. And, you know, which kind of begs another question. And it's one that people have asked me quite a bit over the last number of days. People have said the sort of outlook with regard to live events goes one way or the other. And I think, Michael, you may mention before that people will be anxious to go out there in droves and to try to really go to events and share and connect. But the flip side of it is, will there be great reluctance to even going out there? Will social distancing become the new normal, the new reality? And I guess no one really knows the answer, but I'd love to hear some thoughts about, could it go one way or the other, or does it just be a shade of gray?
I mean, I'd like to say something, and actually one of the questions that came up in the chat was about if there was any disruption like this in the music industry before that we can think of. I mean, this event in and of itself, people compare to what happened in 1918, 1919, so that's literally 100 years. In my lifetime, you know, having lived in New York, worked at a venue, or worked as a concert producer and promoter, I mean, I remember 9/11 when that happened, and obviously a lot of things got canceled immediately, and the only shows that actually went ahead were fundraisers. And I remember in 2002, it took a while, but it came back. And you know, since then, really, live music has been on the up. As far as drum is concerned, we were closed during Hurricane Sandy. That's 2012, 8 years ago, for about a week, 2 weeks. We were in one of the evacuation zones, I believe. And, you know, again, you know, coming back to it, you know, it took a while because people didn't want to just go out. There was also a blackout, you know, south of 42nd Street, if people remember that. So there have been some times, but nothing at this scale, certainly, and certainly nothing that has affected the entire country and the globe at the same time. So, you know, we are talking now about cancellations and how we will all come back to it. I'm sure the same conversation is going on in Japan and Germany and South Africa at the same time, because they're very similar. You know, there will definitely be, you know, some kind of reset, in my opinion. If you can ride this period out, then, you know, if you're one of those that can come back to it, I think, you know, you have the opportunity to build things again. But I'm just concerned that a lot of smaller venues, you know, might have a difficult time if this period gets prolonged. And truthfully, clubs and smaller venues are the lifeline really for the live music industry. You know, it all starts at this level and then it goes up from here. So I just hope that, you know, we will be able to ride this out, and that consumers and fans and those people that really we built the community with can come back to it all, so we can, you know, certainly bring the music and the arts back to our community. You know, obviously each venue does that respectively. So yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, just making sure that you can actually survive this period, that you take the precautions now, that the federal government, the state government, the grants, you know, whatever it may be, that's how we spend most of our time, really, just like educating ourselves and finding the right opportunities to apply to.
Great. Anybody else on that particular question? No. So not to make our question or our context even grimmer, but LJ had a question with regard to the fears now that the medical community is conveying, that there may in fact be a return after we get through this miserable period, however long this will be. There are fears that COVID-19 goes dormant and comes back towards the end of the year. And the question is a difficult one, but an important one. What kind of fail-safe measures, if any, can we be preemptive about in terms of the next time? I know we have to get through the first time first, but if this becomes a more regular wave, then what do we do?
Buy lots of toilet paper.
I realize that this may be like an interesting thing to think about, given that this is like a Mondo panel and Mondo is an in-person conference. But so I think like the day that really hit for me in terms of how dire the situation was the day South by Southwest got canceled which I believe is like the first Friday of March. And in the weeks after that, I had met some companies, mostly in the hardware or consumer electronics world, that for some reason had like put all of their eggs into the South by Southwest basket. I guess because that's like such an important like exhibition space, especially for like larger scale hardware companies or like hardware startups, like VR startups, things like that. So I don't think that will go away. Like once, South by Southwest, 90% sure. Well, we'll come back for sure. And so when that comes back, that certainly isn't going to go away in terms of like the hype around that, and music conferences for sure are not going to go away. But that will be something that's interesting to see in terms of now having experienced this extreme situation, how these kinds of companies that traditionally rely on like really in-person demos, interactions with potential customers and business partners as well, how they really build like a solid online presence and following around their products. I mean, I don't even know if that would be possible given that what they're selling is really tangible. But I know that that's something that a lot of these companies are thinking about in terms of just long-term online branding. And that kind of ties back to what I was saying around like the concert promotion space as well, in terms of, baking a online digital strategy more into the core experience as opposed to having it just be a marketing tool to drive the brick and mortar sales. So that wasn't really like a set answer, but more something that I see more people asking. And if there's any area of the music industry that's growing right now, I think it's the digital marketing sector. I know a lot of like digital marketing agencies are getting a lot more demand from companies, from artists, and from their teams as well, just to create more interesting online campaigns and experiences that stand in their own right and stand alone is really interesting. So I think we'll see a lot more of that.
I think you're going to start seeing a lot of people now contemplating this type of eventuality when they sign deals. They're going to start factoring this into the mix, whether it's, and they're going to, and what I mean is that there's going to be language that people are going to look for in contracts that shift the risk of something like this happening to one party or the other. If this happens, who's on the hook, who's not, who gets out of it, who doesn't get out of it, are there penalties? So you talked about South by Southwest, for example. So when when it was announced that South by Southwest was canceling, a lot of people had questions about, okay, what's going to happen to all those badges that people pre-purchased? There's millions of dollars of money you're talking about here. Now, at first, I'm sure South by Southwest, the promoters did what everybody else did, which was, well, I'm sure we're insured for that. No, they weren't, because most business interruption type insurance doesn't include this, and most other types of event insurance doesn't include this. So instead, they've taken the approach about rolling the badges, the badge income forward to future years and giving credits to people. Sometimes that'll work, sometimes that won't. Sometimes you're going to get sued over that, sometimes you won't. There's going to be a lot of different ways that plays out. But the bottom line is that this is now something people are going to need to think about. Every time you start booking anything related to live event, live engagement, live performance, deliverables of this nature that is 6 months out, 12 months out, anything like that, you need to think about it, and whether you can deal with it through insurance, which may or may not be obtainable and may or may not be cost effective, or you're just going to deal with it through the contract language. It's going to factor into everybody's thinking.
Can I add to that?
Please.
I was going to say that makes a lot of sense for the bigger venues, but for like little venues, in the village or anything like that, there's no contracts. That's kind of unfortunately, those shows just won't happen. It feels like we have to kind of either find like a temporary solution, because it just feels like we're plugging the holes and it's just eventually going to burst. Maybe there's a way to, I've seen, symphonies giving whole performances to empty auditoriums, empty rooms. Maybe there's an incentive that people will want to pay for a live show, but they're not necessarily there. Maybe it's filmed in a way that it really is, it looks more enticing than just, I have a webcam set up in my bedroom. Just an idea.
I have another like more general comment that I think is really important to bring up. in just like this conversation in general. So in terms of like kind of precautions people can take in the future, one narrative that it's been really interesting to see break down as well in the current climate is that streaming saved the music industry. I've been seeing a lot of articles like worded that way in headlines, like oh, Spotify saved the music industry, brought it back to a state of growth, at least the recorded music side, which is in part true, you know, with paid subscription streaming services. But we've seen over the past 2 weeks that in the aggregate, streaming is actually down as well. It's not just touring that's suffering, it's specifically the, you know, the aggregation model of these services like Spotify and Apple Music, the activity around which is also going down. And I don't think that's I certainly didn't expect that. A lot of people in the music industry didn't expect that, certainly not artists as well. So I think there's also important conversation happening around not just how, not just breaking down the model of streaming, just being, you know, kind of to many artists and to many people, it's like a loss leader leading up to a tour where the artist can make more of their bread and butter. Not just that breaking down, but also how can we diversify just like online as well? I think I've seen a lot of artists who without touring kind of realized that all they had online was streaming, which is certainly not sustainable for a lot of artists just in and of itself. And so I've noticed a lot more activity on things like membership platforms. I think Patreon had like over 30,000 signups within just a couple of weeks on the artist side, like new artists starting Patreon pages, and more people signing up than canceling their memberships, which in the current economic climate is really interesting to see. And so I think there's definitely a lot more investment in that. Not that memberships also will save the music industry. I think it's important to critique that model too, but just following the very, you know, standard business advice of diversifying, not just between streaming and touring, but also across multiple kinds of online channels. And live streaming is part of that too.
Great. Thanks, Sherry. So we're going to switch gears. I know we're getting close to the top of the hour, and I think a couple of you have to jump off. But really would like to know if any of you would be willing to share a personal kind of go-to experience during this time of incredible uncertainty and anxiety. And that can be anything. That could be a piece of music that's brought you solace. That could be a book. That could be a piece of art. That could be a significant other. That could be like me, my 70-pound mini wolf. But I would love to just hear, again, if you would be willing to kind of share with us and with the viewers, what's helped in this dreadful time.
I was going to say it's been very interesting both living and working with my partner on a 24/7 basis. It was kind of at first we kind of had to navigate the space and how to, you know, we're married, but then we would always be doing, you know, this rat race in the city where we kind of were strangers in the night, coming in and out doing our thing. And now we just spend a lot more time together just cooking. I mean, I haven't cooked so much in my life. Whenever I finally do get takeout again, I'm going to love it so much more. Just getting to experiment and play and actually, you know, produce things together and projects that we normally don't get to work on. So that's been kind of a nice thing. I also have 2 animals at home, 2 cats. So that's been a great thing, having an animal. I know not everybody has that, but yeah, that's also doing that. And I've also been doing a lot of dancing on my own and just exploring new ways of learning and taking these like IG live classes with teachers I've never, you know, I would normally get to take. So that's been pretty cool.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that as well. This kind of reminded me of 2008, 2009 global recession, because I felt at that time as well, you know, the more skill sets you have, the more of an opportunity you have to do different things so that you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And we're kind of like back there after 12 years. I think it's a great time to learn more things about, you know, life, about your career, about what you'd like to do or what you could be doing. You know, online learning has really skyrocketed. I'm a college professor as well, so doing my classes online really taught me a lot about how to use Zoom and WebEx and some other platforms and how to really redesign course content for students to understand from afar as opposed to do it in person. So I think the more you can do right now and take this opportunity to really sort of like look at yourself, look at what you can add to your toolbox, and then see if you could use this to actually build up something like a side career or something else that could take over later. I think this is the time. And when we come back to this all, at least on the live music side, I don't know about recording and publishing, but I think the live side will really go through some major changes, so that when we come back to it all, it won't be like business as usual, but really it will be different. The deals will change. Maybe what we charge at the door will change. The live streaming element obviously is coming into play, so that's something that we will keep an eye on, of course, as venue operators, but then also for the performance, it's the same. But I agree with what Becca was saying, that we're all in this together. As a community, from larger corporations, larger venues, it's a different kind of game. They play by different rules, but as far as we're concerned, on the local level, as venues that have been serving the local community, we will definitely hold more conversations together in order to see what could really work should something like this hit second time around, or if there was a second wave coming back later this year.
I'll share a brief anecdote. So in general, there's a really interesting conversation happening right now about how relevant celebrity culture is in the current climate, especially because people are more aware with things like this federal stimulus bill being passed, and just the inequality of income, but especially of things like access to tests. There have been a lot of celebrities that have gotten earlier access to tests for COVID-19, all of this stuff. But one of the first live streams or like live stream performances that I saw personally was John Legend's 30-minute set on Instagram Live. It was just him, and his wife was like only sitting wearing a towel next to him by the piano, just cracking jokes all the time. She had a glass of wine, and it just seemed very it seemed like there was no sense of hierarchy. It was just like John Legend put his phone up and just played a couple of songs. He talked through what those songs meant in his own career growth, and there were tons of people, tens of thousands of people tuning in, and I personally really enjoyed it. I think in part because it didn't feel like a celebrity talking down to fans, being like, whoa, look at me, look at the spectacle. It was just very much we're all in this together. We're all experiencing this globally at the same time. Hopefully this will provide some kind of solace. And I don't think he was making any money off it either. It was just a performance kind of out of goodwill to the community as well. So I personally really enjoyed that. It'll be interesting to see how other celebrities kind of act in this time too.
Michael?
Lots of cooking, lots of cooking. I happen to love to cook, so that's a fortunate thing. If I hated cooking, that would really suck. Been doing lots of cooking, and it's part of what's happened is that I don't know about people in other parts of the country. I have kind of a long commute every day, and it's kind of amazing to me how much I've recovered out of my day by not having to schlep in a commute, which I end up literally having to take 3 or 4 modes of transport. I bike to the train to the whatever. Okay, fine. But the point is that when you get 2+ hours of your day back, it's like, wow, I can get a bunch of stuff done, or I can cook something that maybe takes a little bit longer. I'm not quite so rushed about it. Or I can just take a breath. And to a certain extent, I sort of subscribe to the life of Brian attitude of, always look on the bright side of life, cue the whistling. My point is that, as much as a lot of people are struggling, and as much as there's terrible crises happening in this country, in this city. I mean, there's footage on TV of, field hospitals being set up. It looks like a war zone out in certain parts of Queens, which is kind of amazing to me. But at the same time, I think what I'm trying to do is find some of the positivity, trying to be aware, suck down into it, try to focus on the things that are really important to me, my family, the people who I care about, being in touch with them, who I might not otherwise, just because I want to see how they're doing. Aunt so-and-so who's 79 years old. And yeah, do I call Aunt so-and-so very often? No, but yeah, I might check up on her and sort of, ways it forces you to keep in touch with people in a way that I think is important, recognize what's important to you, recognize what's precious, and, maybe slow cook the sauce.
Thank you. Thank you all. We're going to keep the line open a little while longer, but I know some of you had to jump. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. We are hoping to begin to do this on a regular basis. So we'll send out a feedback request. Tell us what you like, tell us what you didn't like, and we want to try to be as helpful and useful as we can. I want to thank all the panelists. I want to thank all the viewers. This is new to us. Well, this entire situation is new to everybody, but you've given it your time and your insight, and I've learned a lot. I just can only, wish everybody safety, good health, and I think reconnecting, I'll give my little 2 cents, reconnecting with people that maybe you don't typically do. They'll be really happy to hear from you and vice versa. But wishing everybody the best. As I said, if you have to go, see you later. We'll stay on live for a little while longer, and just be safe and be well.
Yeah, I have to head out, but thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Yeah,
thank
this
you,
was really
Mehmet.
great
Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Becca. We'll hang on for another 10 or 15 minutes if people want to keep talking. And we will look forward to seeing you all again virtually, and obviously seeing you face to face as soon as the life situation will permit. So, cool. Okay, we had actually from looks like along lines of cooking. Cooking therapy with awesome bottles of wine has worked for me mentally. The Weekends and Jay Electronica's albums to set the mood. From Awil Onaug. I hope I said your name correctly. I happen to agree. Recipes have never seemed just more welcome. And there's an interesting series, which may in fact be New York Times, where this is kind of an anything in your cabinet recipe. So the author there will enable you to substitute 7 or 8 different items to create some great dishes. And obviously, when things are in short supply, if you can make something tasty with whatever's been lingering around the pantry, that is a good thing.
Yeah.
I was able to make banana walnut bread for the first time because I had a lot of really, really ripe bananas and got a recipe, and it turned out great.
So, hey, Becca, I mean, obviously in terms of, sort of your own schedule, we know the live music scene is a gigantic mystery, but what about album releases? What about in terms of new music? How are you kind of looking out on the horizon for that? Bye, Michael. Thank you very, very much. Bye, Mehmet.
That's
saying
so
bye to Michael. I'm here.
Oh, he's still there.
You waved. Okay, I thought you were saying goodbye.
I'm saying goodbye to Michael.
Okay. Thanks.
I think it's really funny that you asked that. I'm listening to my partner next door mixing one of our singles right now as we speak. So I think right now we're kind of delaying putting off, like we've been working on, we have enough material in our repertoire for at least 2 full albums, which is crazy. And we're kind of, perpetual perfectionists over here, and just it never seems to be the right time, and that's something we have to work on. But I would say people kind of go back and forth on releasing an album versus a single. I think we're going to try to release singles and use like platforms like Spotify, and using those kind of those promotion strategies. They have these like 3-month campaigns you can invest in, as opposed to investing in a publicist per se that can be thousands of dollars, and not every band has that budget, especially now. And we're trying to use that time just to experiment. And then really when things settle down and the focus isn't always on Corona, I think that would be like a better time to just, we don't want to put music out there just to put it out there and then no one hears it. I think what Sherry's point when she was talking about streaming going down, I think streaming is going down because people are watching the news. I mean, I'm watching the news 24/7 right now, just trying to keep up to date and stay in touch with friends about what's going on, what are the latest things we can do. So yeah, I mean, I think we have I think it's just using this time to really create new sounds also. We can't record with our horn players per se, but we also are working on synth-based type material too that we can do here, and we don't need like the full band, unfortunately. You know, if there's ways we can use our band to record things and send them over to us, that we're certainly doing. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Mehmet, obviously so much of not only Drone, but you has been in terms of bringing the international community to New York. Is there any communication? I'm not muted. No, okay. What is obviously we've been so sort of New York and U.S. centric, but what with regard to your communications with so many of your colleagues dealing with international artists? What's the general situation?
Well, the general situation is that, you know, with the artists that I work with at that level, I usually work with international talent who don't have as much representation in the U.S., certainly, you know, booking agency, but bands that have established themselves in other markets, specifically in Europe, but really all around the world. Those are sort of like the bands I prefer to work with and introduce them to New York audiences, and then as a tour producer, just tour with them all around the country, going to different music festivals and making sure that they play the right markets to meet their community that's based in the US. So that's sort of like my, you know, my forte, and that's what I work on. I prefer to really work on. Those are the ones that to really go first, Bobby. You know, truthfully speaking, those tours are put together after so much work, and I've been on both sides because not just booking those you know performances in the US, but the artist also has to set aside time, you know, from their busy schedule in their home territory or, you know, continental Europe or wherever they may be. That's how they make their money. So for them to actually tour the United States is a lost endeavor. Certainly the first few tours, if they can break even after a couple of tours, that's actually a big success. So it's put together in, you know, after such lengthy conversations and planning, that when something like this happens and the tour gets canceled, or when something that the federal government enacts, as far as the visa process is concerned, and, you know, there are roadblocks that, you know, are put in place, you know, that really, you know, messes up the situation when, you know, the currency that, you know, they're working with is devalued, or when there are different fluctuations in currency. You know, again, that's another thing. I mean, there are just so many different elements that make these international tours, you know, viable, that, you know, if one of them breaks or if one of them gets hampered, then the entire tour can be in jeopardy at certain times. So unfortunately, that's just the reality of it, that, you know, they're prone to more cancellations, and we've certainly had our share of shows that we had, you know, confirmed and even sold out, certain shows that we had sold out, but then, you know, the band leader can't get into the country for whatever reason, and, you know, the rest of the musicians are in the country, but the singer and the main guy is not here, so what can you do? You have to cancel the show, you have to refund all the tickets. That's just the way that goes. But it's very unfortunate because, you know, you put in so much time and effort into it, and then that gets canceled. And for some of these performers, it's, you know, their income. I mean, you know, we can do maybe with one show being canceled in our calendar of, like, you know, 45 shows a month, but, you know, for them it's a big deal when an entire tour gets canceled. And we've had that. You know, I was just talking to a French guitar player who we had a confirmed show with. He had worked on this for over a year. He was coinciding everything with the release of an album, of a CD, guitar technique, like a book as well, and all of it got canceled, and he was heartbroken. He was really, really heartbroken. But, you know, safety comes first. What can you do? I mean, at the end of the day, you know, it's better to hunker down and make sure to ride this out as opposed to be out there touring right now.
Thank you. And yeah, wise words. And you know, same with us, as so many of our international acts are even asking us about October. That's a wide open question.
Yeah, for a lot of these international performers, you know, 3 to 4 months is sort of like, you know, very short notice. So they have to make the decision in the next, you know, month or two. And that's going to put you in a difficult position too, because, you know, obviously without the showcases, Mondo would look different. So, you know, I definitely feel for you. I don't think any of us are safe. You know, anyone that has any kind of festival, conference, show, tour, anything coming up from here until the end of the year, anything can happen. Nobody can guarantee that things will be in place by September.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think I guess that's probably a good sort of place to leave it. Although I would remiss, I did mention the dog, and I hope I'm not going to unplug everything by There he is.
Oh, that's awesome.
There's
So-
Ollie. For those of you who have stuck around for a long time, you got to see Ollie, who's actually very cooperative now. But I want to thank you. Thanks, everybody. Everybody, well, a lot of people kind of stuck with us even in the after show time here. So let's do this again soon. Mehmet, Becca, wish you guys luck. Obviously, safety, good health to all of our viewers. Same thing. Let us know what you think, and be good to one another. And we will talk again very, very soon.
That's good.
Thanks all.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks for
See
listening.
ya. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.